The hand on the stove made a sound Lily Hayes would never forget. Not a scream. Not yet. First came the hiss like bacon grease hitting a hot pan, then the smell sweet and wrong, the smell of her own skin cooking against cast iron. She was 10 years old. 3 days ago, in the parlor of the Blackwell house in Redemption Springs, Texas, her Uncle Silas held her right arm against the stovetop with the steady pressure of a man who had done worse things and slept fine after. The July heat made the room thick as soup, but Silas had stoked the fire anyway. He always prepared. "Sign the paper, Lily." His voice was calm. That was the worst part. Not angry, not even cruel, just matter-of-fact, like he was asking her to pass the salt. The document lay on the kitchen table. Legal words in fancy script she couldn't fully read, but she knew what it meant. Her father's silver mine. The claim Owen Hayes had died for 6 months ago when the tunnel collapsed. The same mine her mother, Rebecca, had whispered about on her deathbed, clutching Lily's hand, saying, "Don't let him take it. It's yours. It's Samuel's. It's all we have left." "No." The word came out strangled, barely a sound. Silas pressed harder. The sizzle grew louder. Now she screamed. In the corner, 6-year-old Annie stood frozen, clutching the rag doll their mother had sewn before the sickness took her. Annie's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She hadn't spoken in 3 months, not since the day they buried Mama, just silence and those wide brown eyes that saw everything and said nothing. Baby Samuel, 14 months old, wailed from his basket by the door. He didn't understand. He just knew his sister was hurting and the world had gone all wrong. The paper, Lily. Silas's breath smelled like tobacco and something sour. "Sign it and this stops. Refuse, and next time it's Samuel's turn. You want to watch him burn, girl?" Lily's vision went white at the edges. Pain like lightning up her arm into her shoulder, exploding behind her eyes. She tried to twist free, but Silas was a big man, 53 years old, and strong from a lifetime of taking what he wanted. 5 fingers, his palm. She could feel each one separate and distinct brand searing into her flesh. "I'll take that as a no." He held her there for 5 more seconds. Long enough to leave a mark that would never fully fade. Long enough that when he finally let go, Lily crumpled to the floor, cradling her arm, and the only sound she could make was a thin, airless keening. Silas stepped back, adjusted his vest, picked up the unsigned document. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that. Stupid, but spirited." He walked to the door, paused, looked back at the 3 children, one screaming silently on the floor, one standing mute with dead eyes, one wailing in ignorance. "I'm going to San Antonio for 2 days, business with the bank. When I get back, you'll sign. Or I'll take Samuel's hand, then Annie's. Then we'll start on feet. You understand me, girl?" Lily nodded, tears streaming, unable to speak. "Good." The door closed. His boots faded down the hall. The front door slammed. And Lily Hayes, 10 years old, with her right hand burned in the perfect shape of her uncle's grip, made a decision that would save her life or end it. They would run. 3 days later, Nathaniel Brennan saw them from half a mile off. At first he thought it was heat shimmer. The Texas plains did that in July, made the air thick and wavering, like water turned solid things to ghosts. He was 50 years old and had lived in Llano County long enough to know better than to trust his eyes at midday when the sun baked the earth to 112 degrees. But the shapes kept coming, 3 of them, moving wrong, stumbling. Nate set down his hammer, left the fence post half repaired, and started walking, then jogging, then running because he could see it now, could see what he was looking at, and his heart kicked against his ribs like it hadn't in 5 years. Children. 3 children crossing the open desert with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the last shreds of their strength. The oldest one collapsed 50 yards from his fence line. Nate vaulted the rails and reached her in seconds, dropping to his knees in the dust. A girl, maybe 10, with matted blonde hair and skin burned red from days under the sun. She had a bundle clutched to her chest that squirmed and cried. A baby, and beside her, swaying on her feet like a drunk, a smaller girl with hollow eyes. "Easy, easy." Nate's voice came out rougher than he meant, rusty from disuse. He lived alone, talked to horses and the occasional supply wagon driver. Human words felt clumsy in his mouth. "I've got you." The older girl's eyes fluttered open, one blue eye clear as a summer sky, the other swollen nearly shut, ringed with bruises gone purple and yellow. "Please." Her voice was a croak, sandpaper dry. "Please, mister, just take Annie and Sam. You don't have to take me. What, I'm ruined already." She shifted, and Nate saw her right arm for the first time. Saw the bandages filthy and stained, wrapped from wrist to elbow. Saw the way she held it against her body, protective, the way a wounded animal guards its broken limb. "They're good. They're perfect. Sam just needs milk and shade. Annie doesn't eat much. You don't have to keep me. I'm just another mouth. I'm damaged goods." Nathaniel Brennan had been a Texas Ranger for 15 years. He'd tracked outlaws through country that could kill a man in a day. He'd seen bodies left to rot under the sun, seen what humans did to each other when the law looked away. He'd buried friends and strangers, and once, God help him, a whole family murdered for the $20 in their wagon. But he had never, in all those hard years, heard a child offer to die so her siblings could live. Something cracked open in his chest, something he'd sealed shut 5 years ago when he came home from chasing a horse thief and found his wife Abigail and his daughter Emma cold in their beds, taken by yellow fever, while he was 3 counties away doing a job that didn't matter. "How old are you?" His throat was tight. "10, sir." "And you think you're not worth saving?" "I know I'm not." She said it simple as stating the weather, like it was fact. Like someone had told her enough times she believed it. "Uncle Silas told me, right before he put my arm on the stove." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nate looked at the bandages again, looked closer, saw the placement, saw the shape underneath, the way the burns wrapped around her forearm, in a pattern he recognized from his ranger days, from investigations into claim disputes and domestic disturbances gone violent. Fingerprints. Someone had held this child's arm down on a hot surface and left their mark. "What's your name?" The words came out quiet, dangerous. "Rosalie Hayes, sir. Folks call me Lily. And the baby is William Samuel. We call him Sam. He's 14 months. He's hungry, sir. So hungry. We haven't had anything for 2 days." And Nate gestured to the smaller girl still standing, staring at nothing. "Annie. She's 6. She doesn't talk anymore. Not since Mama died." Nate stood, didn't say another word, just scooped up all 3 children, Lily in one arm, Sam in the other, Annie clinging to his neck, and started walking toward his house. "Mister," Lily's voice was confused, weak. "Mister, I said you don't have to take me." "I heard what you said. Then why?" Nate kicked open his front door. The house was dim and cool, blessedly cool after the furnace outside. He laid Lily on the settee by the window, took Sam to the kitchen, found the pitcher of well water he'd drawn that morning. "Because I'm not in the habit of leaving children to die in the sun." He soaked a clean rag, brought it to Lily's cracked lips. "And because anybody who'd ask me to save her baby brother and sister before herself is exactly the kind of person worth saving." He let her suck water from the cloth, watched her throat work, saw the desperation in the way she drank. Annie stood in the doorway, still silent, still clutching that rag doll. "Small sips," Nate said. "You drink too fast, you'll be sick. Sam needs it more. Sam's next. You first. But you want to help your brother and sister." Nate's voice was firm but not unkind. "You need to be alive to do it. Now drink." She drank. For the first time in 5 years, Nathaniel Brennan's house had voices in it that weren't his own. The baby bottle was in the cupboard where he'd left it 5 years ago. Nate stood in his kitchen, holding the glass bottle with the rubber nipple, and felt time fold back on itself. Emma had used this bottle. Abigail had warmed milk in the same pot on the same stove, had tested the temperature. On her wrist had smiled at him over their daughter's head while the baby drank and the world was whole. He'd meant to throw it away. Couldn't. Meant to pack it in the attic. Couldn't. So it sat in the cupboard behind the flour tin gathering dust, waiting. Now he knew why. The milk from the cold cellar was still good. He heated it gentle, not too hot, poured it into the bottle, tested it on his wrist, the way Abigail had taught him. Perfect. Sam latched onto that bottle like he'd never let go. His little hands grabbed at it, his cheeks working, his eyes closing in pure relief. 14 months old, and he'd learned too young what it meant to be hungry. "He's eating?" Lily's voice from the doorway filled with wonder. "He's really eating." "He's going to be fine." "How do you know?" Nate looked at her, this broken little bird with her burned arm and her bruised face and her eyes that had seen too much. "Because I'm going to make sure of it, all three of you." That's when she started crying. Quiet tears sliding down her dusty cheeks, not making a sound. He got the feeling she'd learned a long time ago that crying out loud brought nothing but more pain. He let her cry while he finished feeding Sam, let her cry while he found clean rags and the tin of salve his wife used to make for burns and cuts, knelt beside the settee and reached for her damaged arm, gentle as he could. "This is going to hurt." "I know." Her voice was small. "I'll be as careful as I can. I know." He unwrapped the filthy bandages. What he saw underneath made his jaw clench so hard his teeth ached. Burns. Deep ones. Not an accident, not a fall against a stove or a cooking pot tipped over. This was deliberate. 5 distinct marks, where fingers had gripped, where a palm had pressed, where flesh had been held against hot iron long enough to blister and weep and scar. "Your uncle did this." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir, 3 days ago, maybe 4. Hard to keep track. Why, he wanted me to sign papers that would give him my daddy's silver mine. I said no." Her voice was flat, reporting facts. "He said if I didn't sign, he'd do worse to Sam and Annie." "So you ran?" "Yes, sir, in the middle of the night. Took what food I could carry, took the baby, and Annie walked out into the desert." She looked at him with that one good eye, the other still swollen shut. "Was it wrong?" Nate started cleaning the burns, careful and slow, even though his hands wanted to shake with rage. "It was the bravest thing I've ever heard of, and I was a Texas Ranger for 15 years. Something like hope flickered in her face. He worked in silence for a while, washing away dirt and infection, applying the salve wrapping her arm in clean white bandages. Annie watched from across the room, still holding her doll, still not speaking. Sam had fallen asleep in Nate's chair, milk-drunk and peaceful for the first time in days. "Mr. Lily's voice was hesitant. "Brennan, Nathaniel Brennan. You can call me Nate." "Mr. Nate, why are you helping us? You don't know us. We're not anything to you." He tied off the last bandage, sat back, looked at this child who'd carried her siblings through hell because no one else would. "You're right. You're not anything to me, not yet." He paused, choosing his words. "But 4 years ago, I had a little girl about your age. Her name was Emma. She got sick while I was away, chasing some outlaw who didn't matter. By the time I got home, she was gone. Her and her mother both." Lily's eye went soft. "I'm sorry." "Me too." Nate stood, walked to the window, looked out at the empty land. "I spent 4 years blaming myself, 4 years thinking if I'd just been home, I could have saved them, 4 years wondering what was the point of living if I couldn't protect the people who mattered. What changed?" He turned back to her. "You did. You came walking out of that desert carrying your baby brother ready to die so he could live." His voice roughed. "I don't know if God sent you or if it was just luck. But I know this. I wasn't there for my little girl when she needed me. I'm going to be here for you." Lily didn't say anything, but when he brought her a plate of beans and cornbread, when Annie finally crept close enough to take food, when Sam woke and needed changing, and Nate found cloth diapers that had been Emma's and still smelled faintly of lavender, the little girl reached across the table and touched his hand. Just for a second. Light as a butterfly. It was enough. Night came slow and heavy. Nate gave the children the bedroom, the one he'd shared with Abigail, the one he hadn't slept in since she died. He'd take the settee, keep watch, stay alert. because he knew with the certainty of 15 years wearing a badge that this wasn't over. Lily lay in the big bed with Annie curled against her side and Sam between them. The little girl's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. "Mr. Nate," he paused in the doorway. "Yeah, what's going to happen tomorrow?" "I don't know." "Uncle Silas will come looking. He always comes back. He has papers that say we belong to him, legal papers from a judge in Austin. Papers don't explain burns like that. He'll say I fell, that it was an accident. He's good at lying. Everyone in town believes him." Her voice got smaller. "What if they make us go back?" Nate walked to the bed, sat on the edge. In the dim light from the oil lamp, Lily looked even younger than 10. Annie was already asleep, one small hand clutching her sister's nightgown. Sam snored softly, a sound like a kitten purring. "Listen to me." Nate's voice was low, serious. "I've faced down outlaws and killers. I've stood in front of men with guns who wanted me dead. I'm not afraid of your uncle, and I'm not afraid of legal papers. But what if—" "No what-ifs. You and Annie and Sam, you're staying right here, and anyone who wants to take you is going to have to go through me first. You understand?" She nodded slowly. "Now sleep. You're safe. Promise. Promise." He stood to leave, made it to the door before her voice stopped him again. "Mr. Nate, thank you for not leaving me in the desert. Thank you for reminding me what's worth fighting for." He closed the door, softly walked back to the main room, picked up his rifle, checked the loads, set it by the window where he could reach it fast. Then he sat in the dark and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Around midnight he heard them. Horses coming up the road from town. 4 of them by the sound moving steady and purposeful through the dark. Nate stood, moved to the window, peered through the gap in the curtains. 4 riders. The man in front was heavy-set, wearing a city suit despite the heat, riding like someone unused to horses. Even in the moonlight, Nate could see the anger in his posture, the tension in his shoulders. The other 3 were different. They sat their horses, easy hands near their guns, eyes scanning. Hired muscle, the kind you could find in any frontier town if you had money and no conscience. The riders stopped at his fence line. The heavy man dismounted, straightened his jacket, started walking toward the house. Nate opened the door before the man could knock, stood on his porch with the rifle held loose at his side, not aimed, but ready. "Help you!" The man in the suit looked him up and down, assessing. "You'd be Nathaniel Brennan." "Depends who's asking." "Silas Blackwell. I'm looking for 3 children, a girl and 2 smaller ones. They ran away from my care 3 days ago. I've been searching ever since." He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "I have legal guardianship. The courts gave them to me after their father died. They're my responsibility." Nate didn't move. "Funny kind of care that leaves fingerprint burns on a child's arm." Silas's face didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "The girl told you that, did she?" "She's a liar, Mr. Brennan, a troubled, damaged little liar. She fell against the stove. An accident. Ask anyone in Redemption Springs. Or maybe everyone in Redemption Springs is too scared of you to tell the truth. I want my wards, Brennan, now." "No." The word hung in the night air. Simple. Final. Silas's jaw tightened. "I have legal documents signed by a judge. You're interfering with— I'm telling you to get off my property." Nate's voice stayed level, but the rifle shifted slightly. "Not pointing at anyone, not yet. You've got papers, you want to talk legal, you go get the law. Bring Marshall Cross, bring a judge, bring whoever you want. But until then you're trespassing, and I'm asking you to leave. Those children are mine." "Wrong. Those children are hurt and scared and under my protection. Now mount up and ride out, or we're going to have a problem." One of the hired guns shifted in his saddle hand, drifting toward his pistol. "I wouldn't." Nate's eyes didn't leave Silas, but his voice carried. "I was a ranger for 15 years. Put down faster men than you before breakfast." The tension stretched like a wire pulled tight. Somewhere an owl called. The horses stamped and blew. Silas stood in Nate's yard, weighing his options, calculating odds. Finally he stepped back, mounted his horse. His face was ugly with rage. "This isn't over, Brennan. I'll be back with Marshal Cross. And when I am, you'll answer for harboring runaways, for interfering with legal guardianship, for everything. Looking forward to it." Silas turned his horse, paused, looked back. "That girl. Did she tell you I burned her?" Nate said nothing. "She's a liar. It was an accident. She fell. Ask anyone." His smile was thin, cruel. "But accidents happen all the time out here, don't they? In the desert, in the heat. Children die from accidents every day." Then he rode off his hired guns, following, disappearing into the dark. Nate stood on his porch for a long time after they were gone, listening, watching, making sure they were really leaving. When he finally went back inside, Lily was standing in the hallway. Her face was wet with tears. "He's coming back," she whispered. "He always comes back." "I know." "You should have let us go with him. Now he's going to hurt you too. That's what he does. He hurts everybody." Nate crossed to her, knelt so he was at her level. "Lily, I need you to trust me." "How I don't know you." "Because I'm making you a promise right here, right now. And I've never broken a promise in 50 years. He held her gaze. "I will not let that man hurt you again. I will not let him take you away. And I will not let him get away with what he's done. You hear me? But he has money. He has the law. He has everything. He doesn't have me, and that's going to be his problem." Lily searched his face, looking for the lie, for the moment he'd change his mind, found nothing but iron determination and something she hadn't seen in an adult's eyes for a long time. Belief in her, in the truth, in doing what was right even when it was hard. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. Now go back to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She turned, stopped, looked back. "Mr. Nate, I'm glad we found you." "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." After she was gone, Nate sat in his chair by the window rifle across his knees, watching the road. Somewhere out there, Silas Blackwell was planning his next move, gathering his resources, calling in favors. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Nathaniel Brennan's house had children sleeping in it, had life in it, had a reason beyond just surviving another empty day. He looked at the closed bedroom door, thought about Lily offering to die for her siblings, thought about Annie's silence, thought about baby Sam who just needed milk and someone to care, thought about Emma and Abigail gone but not forgotten. "I couldn't save you," he whispered to the ghosts of his family, "but maybe I can save them. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's what you'd want." The house settled around him. The night deepened. And Nathaniel Brennan, 50 years old and broken for half a decade, found something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. He was going to protect these children, whatever it took, however long it took, even if it killed him, especially if it killed him. Because some things he'd learned too late with his own family were worth dying for. And some things he was learning now with these 3 scared children were worth living for. The trick was knowing which was which, and being ready when the time came to choose. First stand. Dawn came hard and bright through the window where Nathaniel Brennan had kept watch all night. His back ached from sitting in the chair. His eyes burned from staring into darkness. But when the first light touched the horizon, painting the Texas plains gold and red, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: alive. The children were still sleeping. He could hear soft breathing from the bedroom, the occasional rustle of blankets, Sam making small baby noises in his dreams, safe sounds, home sounds. Nate stood, joints popping, and walked to the kitchen. Time to figure out what came next. He was measuring coffee when he heard it, the creak of floorboards. Turned to find Lily in the doorway, still wearing the borrowed nightshirt that hung to her ankles. Her bandaged arm was held close to her body. Her good eye was red-rimmed and exhausted. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." Fair point. Nate poured water into the coffee pot, set it on the stove. "You should rest. You're safe here." "That's what Mama said, the night before she died." Lily's voice was flat, matter-of-fact, reporting history. "She said Uncle Silas would take care of us. She said everything would be fine. She was wrong. Nate struck a match, lit the stove, watched the flame catch and spread. Your mama believed what she was told. Sometimes good people can't see the bad in others. That's not a fault. That's just being human. It got her killed. What happened to your mother, Lily? The girl was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a rooster crowed in the distance. The sky grew lighter blue, bleeding into the red. Finally, she spoke. She got sick after Sam was born, real sick. Couldn't keep food down, couldn't stand without help. Dr. Finch came every day, but she just got worse. Lily's fingers twisted in the nightshirt. Uncle Silas brought her medicine, special medicine he said the doctor made, brown liquid in a blue bottle. She had to take it 3 times a day. And every time she took it, she got sicker, weaker. Her skin went yellow. Her hands shook. She couldn't even hold Sam anymore. The girl's voice cracked. I asked Uncle Silas if maybe the medicine was wrong. He got so angry, said I was questioning the doctor, said I was an ungrateful child, made me watch while he gave Mama the next dose. Nate's hands stilled on the coffee pot. You think he poisoned her? I know he did, because one day he forgot to come. Had business in Austin, left early. Didn't give Mama her medicine. And that day, for the first time in weeks, she could sit up, could talk clear, could smile at me. Lily's good eye filled with tears. She said she felt better, said maybe she was healing, but then Uncle Silas came back that night, gave her a double dose to make up for missing, said she needed it or she'd relapse. And she was dead by morning. The words hung in the kitchen like smoke. Nate poured coffee with hands that wanted to shake, wanted to put his fist through a wall, wanted to ride into Redemption Springs and drag Silas Blackwell into the street. But rage wouldn't help these children. Only patience would. Patience and proof. What about your father? Daddy died first. 6 months before Mama. Cave in at the silver mine. They said it was an accident. Said the support beams were rotten, that he should have checked them better. Lily walked to the table, sat down heavy, like an old woman instead of a 10-year-old child. But the night before it happened, I saw Uncle Silas going into the equipment shed at the mine. It was late, real late. I couldn't sleep and I was looking out my window. He was in there for over an hour with a lantern. Did you tell anyone? I tried to tell Sheriff Patterson in town. He said I was just a grieving child with an imagination, said Uncle Silas was a respected businessman, said I should be grateful I had family to take me in. Her voice went bitter. Sheriff Patterson owes Uncle Silas $4,000. Everyone in Redemption Springs owes Uncle Silas something. That's how he keeps them quiet. Nate set a cup of coffee in front of her, diluted with milk and sugar the way a child might take it. Drink, you need strength. She wrapped her good hand around the warm cup, but didn't drink, just stared into the steam like she could see the past rising there. After Daddy died, Uncle Silas said we had to sell the mine to pay debts, but I found Daddy's papers. He didn't have debts. The mine was making good money. Uncle Silas wanted it because there's silver in that ground, lots of it, enough to make a poor man rich. She finally sipped the coffee, made a face at the bitterness, even with the sugar. That's why he wanted me to sign. If I give up my claim, he gets everything. Me and Annie and Sam get nothing. How much is the mine worth? Daddy said maybe $50,000 if the vein runs deep, maybe more. $50,000. A fortune in West Texas. Men had killed for less, much less. The bedroom door opened. Annie appeared, clutching her ragdoll eyes wide and cautious. She looked at Nate, at Lily, at the strange kitchen in the strange house. Didn't make a sound. "Morning, Annie," Nate said, gentle. "You hungry?" The little girl just stared. "She won't answer," Lily said. "She hasn't talked since Mama's funeral. Doctor says maybe she will someday. Maybe she won't. Sometimes children who see bad things just go quiet inside." Annie's eyes were too old for 6 years. She'd seen her mother waste away, watched her father carried out of a mine in pieces, witnessed her sister tortured. And somewhere in all that horror her voice had just stopped. Nate stood, walked to the cupboard, pulled out flour and eggs and the last of the bacon. Well, talking or not, everyone eats in this house. How do you feel about pancakes? For the first time, something flickered in Annie's face. Not quite a smile, but close. He cooked while the girls watched. Mixed batter, heated the pan, laid strips of bacon to sizzle. The smell filled the kitchen rich and savory. Sam woke crying and Lily fetched him, changed him with the diapers Nate provided, brought him to the table. When the food was ready, Nate set out plates, stacks of pancakes, crispy bacon, butter, and syrup. More food than 3 children who'd been starving had seen in days. Lily reached for a pancake, hesitated, looked at Nate. "Go ahead," he said. She took one. Annie just stared at her plate. "Annie doesn't think she's allowed," Lily explained quietly. "Uncle Silas said children should eat last and least, said we were expensive. If we took too much, we'd get the switch." Nate knelt beside Annie's chair. "Annie, look at me." The little girl's eyes met his. "In this house, children eat first. You eat as much as you want. There's always more, and no one ever gets hit for being hungry. You understand?" Annie's lower lip trembled. "I know you can't talk right now. That's okay. But can you nod if you understand?" Slowly, Annie nodded. "Good. Now eat." She picked up a piece of bacon, nibbled it. Her eyes went wide. And then she ate like she'd never stop. Both girls did, pancakes and bacon and syrup, until their faces were sticky and their bellies were full. Sam gummed at a pancake piece, got more on his face than in his mouth, laughed at the mess. It was the laugh that did it. High and pure and completely unafraid. The sound a baby makes when the world is good. Lily started crying, not the silent tears from before, real crying. Shoulders shaking, breath hitching, grief pouring out. "He's laughing," she sobbed. "I didn't think he remembered how." Nate moved around the table, put his hand on her shoulder. She flinched, then relaxed. Let herself be comforted. "You kept him alive," Nate said. "You walked through hell to save him. Now you get to see him happy. That's your reward." "I was so scared. I thought we'd die in the desert. I thought Uncle Silas would find us first. I thought no one would ever believe us." "I believe you. But you're just one person. One person is all you need if they're the right person." Annie reached across the table, touched her sister's hand. No words, just connection. "We're here. We're together. We're safe. For now." Marshal Declan Cross arrived around mid-morning riding a bay mare that had seen better days. He was a lean man, 45 years old, with a weathered face and eyes that missed nothing. Wore his badge on his vest like it meant something. Nate met him at the fence line. "Declan." "Nate." Cross swung down from his horse. "Heard you had visitors last night. Silas Blackwell and 3 of his hired guns. News travels fast. Silas made sure of it. He's in town right now telling everyone you're harboring his wards. Says he's got legal papers. Says you threatened him with a rifle." Papers don't mean much when they're soaked in blood and lies. Cross's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. "Mind if I see the children? Mind if I ask whose side you're on? The law's side, which right now means I need to verify facts before I can do anything." Cross met Nate's eyes. "But between you and me, I've had questions about Silas Blackwell for a long time. Man gets rich while everyone around him dies poor. Makes a person wonder." Nate led him to the house. Inside, Lily sat on the settee with her arm rewrapped in clean bandages. Annie was on the floor playing with a set of wooden blocks Nate had carved for Emma years ago. Sam was napping in the bedroom. Cross removed his hat, approached slowly, like you would a spooked horse. "Miss Lily Hayes, I presume?" Lily nodded, wary. "I'm Marshal Cross. I need to ask you some questions, and I need you to tell me the truth. Can you do that?" "Depends. Are you going to make me go back to Uncle Silas?" "Not if what I suspect is true." Cross knelt gentle. "May I see your arm?" Lily looked at Nate. He nodded. She unwrapped the bandages. The burns were still angry red, blistered and weeping. But the pattern was unmistakable. 5 fingers, a palm, a hand that had held and pressed and hurt. Cross's jaw tightened. He was quiet for a long moment, just looking. Then he wrapped the bandages back up himself, careful as a father. "That's not from falling against a stove." "No, sir." "Tell me what happened." So she did, all of it. The papers, the refusal, Silas's calm voice and cruel hands, the smell of her own skin burning, the threat against Sam, the decision to run. Cross listened without interrupting. When she finished, he stood, walked to the window, stared out at nothing. "I believe you," he said finally. "But believing and approving are different things. Silas has documents from a judge in Austin. Legal guardianship, all proper and signed. He'll say you're lying, say the burn was an accident, and half the town will back him up." "Because they owe him money," Lily said flatly. "Yes." "So what do we do?" Nate's voice was hard. Cross turned. "We build a case. Real evidence. Not just testimony from a child, no offense, miss, but something that will stand up in court." He lowered his voice. "There are things about the deaths of Owen and Rebecca Hayes that never sat right with me. Owen was careful. Good miner. His tunnel collapsing doesn't make sense. And Rebecca, she was healthy as a horse until after Sam was born. Then suddenly she's wasting away. Lily thinks Silas poisoned her," Nate said. "I think so too. But thinking isn't proof." Cross moved closer to Nate, speaking quiet so the girls wouldn't hear. "There's a doctor in town, Augustus Finch. He treated Rebecca before she died. I've seen him at the saloon drinking alone, looking haunted. I think he knows something, but Silas has him scared." "Can you talk to him? I can try. But Nate, you need to understand what you're up against. Silas Blackwell owns that town. The bank, half the businesses, holds notes on most of the ranches. People are terrified of him. They'll lie, they'll look away, they'll do whatever it takes to stay on his good side. Then we make them more afraid of the truth than they are of Silas. How? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out." Cross studied him. "You were a ranger for 15 years. You know how this works. You know that sometimes the law isn't enough. Sometimes bad men win because they're richer or smarter or more ruthless. And sometimes," Nate said, quiet, "they win because good men do nothing. I'm not doing nothing. I'm doing what I can within the law." "Is it enough?" Cross had no answer for that. He left shortly after promising to investigate, to talk to Dr. Finch to see what evidence he could find. But his face said what his words didn't. It wouldn't be enough. That afternoon, Nate changed Lily's bandages again. The burns were healing, but slowly. They'd scar. She'd carry Silas's handprint for the rest of her life. "Does it hurt?" he asked. "Not as bad as it did." "Good." He tied off the clean wrapping, gentle. "You're tough, you know that. I don't feel tough. Tough isn't not being scared. Tough is being scared and doing what needs doing anyway." Nate sat back. "You walked through the desert to save your brother and sister. That's the definition of tough." Lily looked at her bandaged arm. "How long until you send us away?" "What? Uncle Silas will come back. He'll bring more men, papers from judges, maybe lawyers, and you'll realize we're more trouble than we're worth. That's what always happens. People say they'll help, then they change their minds." Nate took her good hand in both of his. "Look at me." She did. "I'm not sending you away. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Not ever, unless you want to go. That's a promise. And I don't break promises. But what if Uncle Silas wins? What if the law says we have to go back? Then we'll find another way." "Like what?" "I don't know yet, but we will." He squeezed her hand. "You survived 3 days in the desert with a burned arm and 2 small children. I survived 15 years as a ranger. Between us, we're smart enough to outsmart one greedy banker." For the first time, Lily smiled, small and uncertain, but real. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why didn't you get married again after your wife died?" The question hit harder than he expected. Nate was quiet, thinking. "I guess I thought if I didn't let anyone close, I couldn't lose them again. Couldn't hurt like that again." "But aren't you lonely? Every day." "Then why keep doing it?" "Because I'm a coward." The words came out rough, honest. "Because it's easier to be alone than to risk caring." Lily's thumb rubbed across his knuckles small circles. I think you're wrong. About what? About being a coward. Cowards don't run toward children dying in the desert. Cowards don't stand up to men with guns. Cowards don't make promises to keep people safe even when it's dangerous. Nate's throat went tight. I think, Lily continued, you're the bravest person I've ever met, and I think your wife and daughter would be proud of you. For saving us. For caring even when it hurts. He couldn't speak for a moment. Just sat there with his 10-year-old girl holding his hand, saying things he needed to hear and didn't deserve. Thank you, he managed finally. For what? For reminding me why I stopped being a ranger. It wasn't to chase outlaws. It was to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. He stood. Come on, let's see if we can get Annie to eat more than 2 bites at dinner. They found Annie in the main room still playing with the wooden blocks. She'd built a little house, put her rag doll inside, was humming something tuneless and quiet. Nate started making supper, nothing fancy. Beans, cornbread, some dried beef from the cellar. But he cooked with care the way Abigail had taught him. Made it good. When the food was ready, they all sat together. Lily helped Sam eat. Annie took 4 whole bites this time instead of 2. Progress. Halfway through the meal, Annie reached for the cornbread. Her sleeve rode up. Nate saw bruises on her wrist, yellow-green and old. Annie, he said gentle, did your uncle hurt you too? The little girl froze, looked at Lily. He hit her, Lily said quietly. When she wouldn't stop crying after Mama died, grabbed her arm and shook her, said children should be silent unless spoken to. Is that when you stopped talking, Annie? The little girl nodded. Something cold settled in Nate's chest. Not rage this time. Something colder, harder. The feeling he used to get as a ranger when he was tracking someone who needed to face justice. Silas Blackwell had hurt these children, had murdered their parents, had tortured and terrified them for money, and the law might not be enough to stop him, which meant Nate would have to find another way. After dinner, after the children were in bed, after the house was quiet, Nate sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, thinking, planning. He heard the soft pad of bare feet, turned to find Lily in the doorway again. You should sleep, he said. So should you. I'm keeping watch. Can I keep watch with you? He made space on the step. She sat careful of her arm. Together they looked out at the dark plains, the stars overhead, the vast empty, nothing that stretched in all directions. Mr. Nate? Yeah, that thing you said earlier, about finding another way if the law doesn't work. Lily's voice was small. What did you mean? Nate was quiet, choosing words carefully. I meant that I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Whatever it takes. You understand? Even if it's against the law. Even then. She absorbed this. Would you kill him, Uncle Silas? If that's what it takes. But then you'd go to jail. Maybe. Maybe not. Depends how it happens. He looked at her. Does that scare you? Knowing I'd be willing to do that? Lily thought about it. Really thought. Finally shook her head. No, it makes me feel safe. Because Uncle Silas is the kind of person who only understands force. Words don't work on him. Laws don't work. The only thing that will stop him is someone stronger saying no. You're a smart kid. I'm a kid who had to grow up fast. They sat in silence for a while. Then Lily leaned against his shoulder just slightly. Testing. When he didn't pull away, she relaxed. Thank you, she whispered, for the pancakes. He thought she meant this morning, then realized she meant something bigger. Pancakes meant safety, meant family, meant someone who cared if they were hungry or hurt or scared. You're welcome, he said. Anytime you want pancakes, you just ask. Even if it's for dinner, even if it's for dinner. She smiled against his shoulder. And then, soft as breathing, Annie appeared in the doorway, stood there in her nightshirt, holding her doll, looking at them with those 2 old eyes. Come here, Annie, Nate said. She came, sat on his other side, let him put his arm around her small shoulders. 3 people on a porch, 2 children who'd lost everything, 1 man who'd thought he had nothing left to give, together in the dark, watching for danger. making a family out of broken pieces. And inside the house, baby Sam slept peaceful and safe, dreaming whatever babies dream, not knowing yet that his whole world had shifted, that the man who'd wanted to destroy them was becoming the man who'd give his life to protect them. Tomorrow would bring more trouble. Silas would come back with lawyers or guns or both. The town would whisper, the law would be slow. But tonight on this porch under these stars, something was being built that was stronger than hate or greed. Something Silas Blackwell could never understand. A bond forged not in blood, but in choice. And when Annie finally whispered her first words in 3 months, so quiet Nate almost missed them, he understood that some victories were small and perfect, and worth more than all the gold in Texas. "Thank you," she breathed, "for the pancakes." Lily gasped, threw her arms around her sister, started crying. And Nathaniel Brennan, 50 years old and broken for half a decade, held 2 little girls while they cried and laughed and cried some more. Because one of them had found her voice, and all of them had found home. Midpoint. The conspiracy. 3 days after Marshall Cross's visit, the morning came quiet and still. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made a man check his weapons twice and watch the horizon with tired eyes. Nate was fixing the fence post he'd abandoned when he first saw the children stumbling out of the desert. Seemed like a lifetime ago now, instead of less than a week. His hands worked the wire with practiced ease, but his mind was elsewhere. On evidence, on proof, on how to bring down a man who owned half a county. The sound of wagon wheels made him turn. Esperanza Vargas was driving up the path, her face set with determination. But there was grief there too, sitting heavy in the lines around her mouth, the shadows under her eyes. Nate set down his tools, walked to meet her. "Essie?" "Nate." She climbed down without waiting for help, brushed dust from her skirts. "We need to talk, inside, away from ears." In the kitchen, with Lily keeping Annie and Sam occupied in the bedroom, Essie sat at the table and folded her hands like she was praying. Maybe she was. "My husband didn't die in an accident." The words came out flat, final, like she'd been holding them in so long they'd calcified into stone. Nate poured coffee, set a cup in front of her. "Tell me." "Carlos Morales, best miner Owen Hayes ever hired. Careful. Methodical. The kind of man who checked every beam twice, who'd rather waste a day being safe than risk a life being fast." Essie's hands tightened around the cup. "The morning he died, he inspected the tunnel. Told me at breakfast the supports were solid. Said Owen ran a good operation, not like the death traps some owners called mines." And that afternoon the tunnel collapsed. "That afternoon my husband was crushed under 2 tons of rock and timber." Her voice cracked. "They said the beams were rotten. Said Carlos should have noticed. Said it was tragic, but these things happen in mining. But you don't believe that. I found his work clothes, the ones they gave me after they pulled his body out." Essie reached into her bag, pulled out a folded piece of fabric, unfolded it on the table. "Look at this. Really look." Nate leaned close. The fabric was stiff, with old blood and dirt. But there, caught in the weave, were fine curls of wood. Fresh wood, pale and clean. "Sawdust," he said. "From a saw. Not from natural rot. Not from age. From someone cutting through support beams." Essie's eyes were hard. "I showed this to Sheriff Patterson in town. He said it must have gotten there some other way. Said I was seeing things that weren't there because of grief. Said I should accept God's will and move on." How much does Patterson owe Silas? $4,000. Maybe more now with interest. Nate stood paced to the window, looked out at the empty land. Owen Hayes died the same way 6 months later. Same story. Tunnel collapse. Rotten beams. Tragic accident. 2 careful men. 2 convenient deaths. And Silas Blackwell inherited everything. Essie's voice dropped to a whisper. "I think he killed them both. I think he's been killing anyone who stands between him and money for years." The bedroom door opened. Lily stood there, her bandaged arm held close, her face pale. "He killed them," she said. Not a question, a statement. Mama and Daddy both. Lily, you should rest. Nate moved toward her, but she shook her head. I heard you talking, and I need to tell you something I've been too scared to say. She walked to the table, sat down with the careful precision of someone much older. The night before Daddy died, I couldn't sleep. I was worried because Daddy and Uncle Silas had been arguing about money, about how to run the mine. Uncle Silas wanted to work it faster, hire cheaper labor-cut corners. Daddy said that's how men died. Essie leaned forward. What did you see, mija? I got up to get water, looked out my window, and I saw Uncle Silas walking toward the mine. It was late, maybe midnight. He was carrying a lantern and something else, something long and thin. Lily's good hand gripped the table edge. He went into the equipment shed, stayed there for over an hour. When he came out, he didn't have the long thing anymore. A saw, Nate said quietly. He took a saw into the shed. I didn't think anything of it then, just thought he was working late. But the next morning, when they told us about the collapse, about Daddy being dead, I remembered. Tears started down her cheeks. I should have said something, should have told someone. You were a child. You didn't know. Essie reached across, took Lily's hand. But Silas knew. He planned it. Probably cut the beams just enough that they'd hold for a while, then give way when Owen was alone in the tunnel. And Mama, Lily's voice broke. How did he kill Mama? Nate exchanged a look with Essie. How much truth could a 10-year-old bear? How much should they shield her from? But Lily's eye was steady, old beyond her years. I need to know, please. Tell her, Essie said. She's earned the truth. Nate sat down across from Lily, chose his words carefully. You told me your mama got sick after Sam was born, that she kept getting worse no matter what medicine she took. The medicine Uncle Silas brought, from Dr. Finch. Did Dr. Finch ever come himself to check on your mother? Lily thought about it. At first he did, every few days. He'd examine Mama, take her pulse, listen to her breathe. He looked worried, kept writing things in his notebook. She paused. But then Uncle Silas told him not to come anymore, said it upset Mama too much having a doctor hovering, said he'd pick up the medicine himself and bring it to her. And that's when she got worse. Yes. Lily's voice was small. Every dose she got weaker. Her skin turned yellow, her hands shook. She couldn't keep food down, couldn't hold Sam. The tears came faster now. I asked Uncle Silas if maybe the medicine was wrong, if maybe we should try something different. He got so angry, said I was questioning the doctor's expertise, said I was an ungrateful child who didn't understand medicine. What happened next? Essie asked gently. He made me watch, made me stand there while he gave Mama the next dose. She didn't want to take it. She said it made her feel worse, but Uncle Silas said she had to, or she'd die. Lily's hands trembled. So she drank it, and 3 days later she was dead. The kitchen was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the mantel and Annie's soft humming from the bedroom where she was playing with Sam. Finally Nate spoke. Lily, I need you to think very carefully. The medicine Silas brought. What did it look like? Brown liquid in a blue glass bottle. She had to take a spoonful 3 times a day. Did you ever see where Silas kept it? In his room. He locked it in a cabinet by his bed. Lily's eye widened. Wait. There was one day he forgot to give it to her. He had to go to Austin for business, left early in the morning before he remembered. Didn't get back until late that night. And how was your mother that day? Better. So much better. She could sit up, could talk without coughing, could smile at me. The memory made Lily's face crumple. She said maybe she was healing. Maybe God was answering our prayers. She was happy. For one whole day she was happy. But then Silas came back. He was upset he'd forgotten the medicine, said Mama could have relapsed, could have gotten worse. He gave her a double dose to make up for it. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. And by morning she was dead. Essie's face had gone white. Poison. He was poisoning her slowly. Arsenic, probably, Nate said. Small doses over time. Symptoms match. Yellow skin tremors, vomiting, wasting away. And one day without it she improved. But a double dose after her body started recovering, that would kill. Why? Lily's voice was anguished. Why would he kill his own family? Money. The word tasted like ash in Nate's mouth. Your father's silver mine, your mother's inheritance rights. With them dead and you children under his guardianship, he controls everything. But I wouldn't sign the papers. I said the mine was mine and Sam's and Annie's, which is why he burned your arm, why he threatened Sam, why he'll keep hurting you until you either sign or die. Nate stood his decision made. We need proof, real proof, something that will stand up in court. Dr. Finch would know, Essie said. He treated Rebecca. He must have records. Will he talk? I don't know, but I can try. Essie stood. I'll go to him tonight, quietly, see what he knows. Be careful. If Silas finds out you're asking questions, I've been careful for 2 years, watching, waiting, gathering courage. Essie's jaw set. Carlos deserves justice. Rebecca deserves justice. Owen deserves justice, and these children deserve to be free. After Essie left, Nate found Lily on the porch staring at nothing. He sat beside her, didn't speak, just gave her space to process. Finally she said, I should have known, should have seen it. You were a child. You are a child. This isn't your fault. But if I'd been smarter, braver, if I'd spoken up sooner, then Silas would have killed you too, and Annie, and Sam. He's not the kind of man who lets witnesses live. Nate put his hand on her shoulder. You did the only thing you could. You survived. You kept your brother and sister alive. You ran when you had the chance. That took more courage than most adults ever manage. Will it be enough? The truth. I don't know, but we're going to try. She leaned against him just slightly. I'm tired of being scared. I know. I want to be a normal girl who worries about school and friends and what dress to wear, not about uncles who murder and courts who might not care. Someday you will be, I promise. They sat in silence as the sun moved across the sky, painting the land in shades of gold and shadow. Inside, Annie was teaching Sam to stack blocks, her small voice counting in a whisper. 1, 2, 3, progress. Evening came soft and blue. Nate made dinner, nothing fancy, stew from yesterday's venison biscuits, honey. But he made it with care the way feeding people mattered when they'd been starved. Lily helped one-handed stirring the pot while Nate cut vegetables. Annie set the table with solemn concentration, placing each fork and knife just so. Sam banged a spoon on the floor, delighted with the noise. It felt like family, like home. And that's when Marshal Cross arrived riding hard, his horse lathered with sweat. Nate met him at the door, saw the look on his face, knew immediately something had changed. What happened? Cross dismounted, took off his hat, wiped his brow. I've been in Austin, meeting with contacts, checking records. He paused. Nate Silas Blackwell is broke, completely, utterly broke. The words didn't make sense. That's not possible. He owns half of Redemption Springs. On paper, yes. In reality, it's all mortgaged, all borrowed. He's been living on credit and charm for 2 years. Cross pulled out a folded telegram. The First Bank of San Antonio is foreclosing. They've given him 10 days to pay his debts or they seize everything. The bank, the businesses, the house, everything. Nate's blood went cold. 10 days. 10 days, which means he doesn't just want the mine. He needs it, desperately. It's the only asset valuable enough to save him. Cross looked toward the house where the children were, and he's willing to do anything to get it. He'll come for them. Harder this time, more violent, yes, and probably soon. Cross lowered his voice. Nate, I can offer protection, but not enough. Not against a desperate man with nothing to lose. You need to move those children. Get them somewhere Silas can't reach. I know a place. Where? The Comanche settlement. Chief Running Bear. Lily's mother had Comanche blood. They'll take them in, keep them safe under tribal law. Nate's mind was already working, planning. Silas's money means nothing there. His hired guns won't risk going on to tribal land. When, tomorrow, first light. Nate turned back to the house. Tonight we prepare." Cross left to make his own preparations to gather what evidence he could to send word to Judge Morrison that a trial was coming, ready or not. Inside, Nate found Lily setting the table with Annie's help. Sam was in his makeshift high chair, gnawing on a biscuit. They ate together, the four of them, like they had for the past few nights. Nate told them stories about his days as a ranger, made them laugh with tales of outlaws too dumb to succeed and horses too smart to catch. Annie giggled, actually giggled. Sam clapped his sticky hands. For an hour, they pretended the world was safe. After dinner, after the children were in bed, Nate sat on the porch with his rifle and watched the dark. He was still watching when the first flames appeared, not close, maybe a mile away, but unmistakable, orange and red against the black sky, growing brighter, spreading fast. His warehouse, 6 months of grain, 6 months of work, burning. Nate didn't move, didn't run to fight it, because he knew it was a message, a warning. Next time it wouldn't be a warehouse. Next time it would be the house, with the children inside. Silas Blackwell was done playing, and Nathaniel Brennan, 50 years old, and tired of watching evil win, made his own decision. Tomorrow the children would go to safety, but he would stay. And when Silas came, and he would come, Nate would be ready. Not with law, not with papers, not with courts that could be bought and witnesses who could be scared, with something older, something simpler. Justice at the end of a gun. He sat there all night watching his warehouse burn, feeling the heat of it even from a mile away. Thinking about Owen Hayes crushed under rock, about Rebecca Hayes poisoned slow and cruel, about Carlos Morales and all the others who'd stood in Silas's way, about Lily's burned arm and Annie's silence and baby Sam, who deserved to grow up without fear. The sun rose on ash and ruin, and Nathaniel Brennan, broken ranger turned reluctant father, felt something settle in his chest. Purpose, cold and hard and absolutely certain. 10 days until Silas lost everything, which meant 9 days, maybe less, until he came with everything he had left. Let him come. Nate would be waiting, and one way or another this would end, in mercy or in blood, preferably both. Escalation. The burned warehouse still smoldered when dawn broke over Redemption Springs. Black smoke curled into the morning sky like a warning, like a promise. 6 months of grain turned to ash. 6 months of Nate's sweat and planning reduced to cinders and char. The message was clear. Silas Blackwell was done being patient. Nate stood in the ruins, ash coating his boots, while Marshal Cross walked the perimeter, looking for evidence they both knew wouldn't lead anywhere. The track stopped at the main road. The witnesses had been asleep. The fire had started from nowhere and everywhere at once. "This is just the beginning," Cross said quietly. "Next time, it'll be the house, with the children inside." Nate's jaw tightened. "Not if I move them first. Move them where Silas has eyes all over this county. Somewhere he can't reach. Somewhere his money doesn't matter." Cross looked at him sharp. "You're thinking about the Comanche settlement. I'm thinking about keeping 3 children alive." Nate kicked at a piece of charred timber. "Essie can take them. She knows the trails, knows Chief Running Bear. They'll be safe there while we figure this out. And if Silas finds out where they went, then he'll have to go through the Comanche Nation to get them, and something tells me his hired guns aren't that stupid." They rode back to the ranch in silence. Lily was waiting on the porch, Annie beside her, both girls wound tight with worry. Sam was playing in the dirt, oblivious the way babies were. One look at Nate's face told Lily everything. "He did it, didn't he? Uncle Silas burned your warehouse." "Looks that way. This is our fault. If we weren't here, he wouldn't be hurting you." Nate dismounted, tied his horse, walked straight to Lily, and knelt so they were eye level. "Listen to me. This is not your fault. This is Silas's fault. He's the one making these choices. He's the one hurting people, not you. But we brought him to your door. And I chose to open it. I chose to let you in. I chose to fight for you." He put his hand on her shoulder, gentle. "Those are my choices, Lily. Mine. And I'd make them again. Annie tugged on his sleeve. When he looked, she mouthed 2 words with no sound. Thank you. Progress. Every day, a little more of her voice coming back. We need to talk, Nate said to both girls. Inside. They gathered in the kitchen. Cross leaned against the wall. Nate explained the plan, watching Lily's face go through fear and understanding and finally reluctant acceptance. You're sending us away, she said flatly. I'm sending you somewhere safe. There's a difference. For how long? Until I can make sure Silas can't hurt you anymore. And if you can't, her voice cracked, what if you die trying? What if we never see you again? Nate reached across the table, took her hand. I'm not going to die. I'm too mean and too stubborn. Your uncle's going to learn that the hard way. You promise? I promise I'll do everything in my power to come back to you, all 3 of you. Lily's eye filled with tears. We just found you. I don't want to leave. I know, but this is how I keep you safe. This is how I make sure Silas doesn't get what he wants. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him, her bandaged arm pressed against his chest, her good arm tight around his neck. Please don't die, she whispered. Please. And Nate held her, this brave little girl who'd carried too much for too long, and felt something crack in his chest, something that had been frozen since Abigail and Emma died, something warm and painful and alive. I won't, he said into her hair. I promise. When she pulled back, Annie was crying silently, tears running down her small face. Nate gathered her up too, held both girls, while they cried out their fear. Sam crawled over confused, wanting to be part of whatever was happening. Nate picked him up too, somehow, holding all 3, this makeshift family he'd known for less than a week, but would die to protect. We'll come back, Lily said, pulling herself together with visible effort. After it's safe, we'll come back and we'll be a real family. Right? Right. Promise? Promise. Essie arrived an hour later with a wagon and supplies. She'd made this trip before, knew the way to the Comanche settlement by heart. Chief Running Bear would take them in. He owed Essie a debt from years back when she'd nursed his grandson through fever. The goodbye was quick. Had to be. If they dragged it out, Nate might not let them go. Lily hugged him one more time. Be careful. Always am. Liar. He smiled despite everything. Maybe a little. Annie pressed something into his hand. Her rag doll, the one she carried everywhere. When he tried to give it back, she shook her head fierce. Mouthed the words, keep safe. I'll guard it with my life, Nate said. Meant it. The wagon pulled away. 3 children and 1 determined woman heading east toward a land where Silas's money meant nothing and his threats were empty. Nate watched until they were dust on the horizon. Then he turned to Cross. Now we get the evidence we need, whatever it takes. The Hayes Silver Mine sat 5 miles outside Redemption Springs, a gash in the earth that had made Owen Hayes a wealthy man and gotten him killed for it. Nate approached on foot just after sunset, moving quiet through the scrub brush, using every skill he'd learned in 15 years of tracking outlaws. The mine operated day and night. Torches burned at the entrance. Men moved in and out, hauling ore-changing shifts. Silas had wasted no time taking over operations, working it hard and fast, trying to squeeze every dollar before the banks came calling. Nate waited until the shift change. Chaos and confusion. Men tired and not paying attention. He slipped into the line of workers heading underground, head down, hat pulled low, looking like just another miner in dusty clothes. Nobody questioned him, nobody looked twice. The tunnels were hell. Hot and close and smelling of earth and sweat and fear. Support beams creaked overhead. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. Men worked by lamplight picks ringing against stone voices echoing. Nate moved with purpose like he knew where he was going, walked past the main shaft to the equipment shed at the back of the compound. The door was locked, but the hinges were old. He jimmied it with his knife, heard the satisfying click, slipped inside. Darkness. He lit a match, held it high. Tools, spare beams, coils of rope, And there on the workbench, exactly what he'd hoped to find. A saw, old but well maintained. The teeth were clean, but when Nate looked close, really close, he could see fibers caught in the metal. Wood fibers. Fresh ones mixed with old. Someone had cut through support beams. Recently. Deliberately. He wrapped the saw in his coat, kept searching. Found a ledger book half hidden under a stack of mining reports. Opened it. Accident log. Dated back 3 years. 5 deaths. All ruled accidental. All involving equipment failure or tunnel collapse. All occurring within 6 months of the deceased asking for higher wages or questioning safety practices. Nate memorized the names, closed the book, started to leave. The door opened. Colt stood there, one of Silas's hired guns, the one with the scar down his cheek and dead eyes. He looked at Nate, looked at the wrapped saw, put it together fast. "Well now," Colt said slowly, "ain't you supposed to be dead in a warehouse fire?" Nate didn't answer, just calculated distances. Door behind Colt. Window too small to fit through. Only one way out. Through. He moved fast, throwing the saw at Colt's face, following with his shoulder. Colt dodged the saw, but not the tackle. They went down hard, crashed into shelving tools, raining around them. Colt was younger by 15 years, meaner by nature, used to fighting dirty because clean fighting got you killed on the frontier. He twisted like a snake, got a knee into Nate's ribs. The air left Nate's lungs in a whoosh. Before he could recover, Colt's elbow caught him in the jaw, snapping his head back. Stars burst across his vision, white and blinding. For a second, Nate was 50 years old, and slow and stupid for thinking he could still do this, for thinking age and experience could beat youth and viciousness. Then he remembered Lily's burned arm, remembered Annie's silence, remembered baby Sam, who'd never known his father because men like Colt killed for money and slept fine after. The rage cleared his head like cold water. Nate grabbed Colt's collar with both hands, used the momentum of the younger man's next punch to pivot, hauled him up with strength born of pure fury, and slammed him down on the workbench. Hard. The wood cracked under the impact. Colt's breath left him in a grunt. "How many?" Nate's voice was ice. "How many men did you help Silas murder?" Colt's answer was to grab a wrench from the bench, swing it at Nate's head. Nate caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted until something popped. The wrench clattered to the floor. Colt screamed, "Wrong answer." Nate hit him, once, twice, not to knock him out, to hurt, to make him understand what pain felt like when you couldn't fight back, when you were helpless, when someone bigger and stronger decided you didn't matter, like a 10-year-old girl held to a burning stove. But Colt was screaming now, yelling for help. Voices outside, running feet. Nate grabbed the saw, the ledger ran for the door. Mackey and Reeves were coming, 2 more of Silas's men, blocking his path. He didn't slow. Hit them like a freight train, used momentum, and surprise broke through. Out into the compound. Men turning, shouting. Someone grabbed at him. He twisted free, kept running. Gunfire. A bullet whined past his ear. Another kicked up dirt at his feet. He made it to the rocks. The scrub brush, the darkness beyond the torches, ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed. Every step was a choice. Keep running or turn and fight. Die now or die later. Save yourself or go back for one more piece of evidence, one more chance to nail Silas to the wall. Nate's ranger training screamed at him. Never run into the dark. Never turn your back on the enemy. Never leave a fight unfinished. But 15 years of experience whispered something different. Live to fight another day. Dead heroes don't save children. Retreat isn't surrender when you're outnumbered and outgunned. His shoulder throbbed where he'd hit the ground. His ribs ached from Colt's knee. Blood ran hot from a cut above his eye he didn't remember getting. 50 years old, and running through the dark like a green boy who'd bitten off more than he could chew. But his hands gripped the saw. The ledger was tucked in his shirt. Physical proof, undeniable evidence. Worth more than his pride, worth more than proving he could still fight like he was 25. The children needed him alive, not brave, not heroic, just alive. So he ran and chose life over glory. didn't stop until he was sure they'd given up the chase. Only then did he check his prizes: the saw, the ledger, evidence, real solid undeniable evidence. Now they just needed one more piece. Esperanza Vargas had lived in Redemption Springs for 20 years. She knew everyone, heard everything, saw what people tried to hide. When her husband Carlos died in the mine collapse, she'd stopped believing in accidents. Now she sat across from Dr. Augustus Finch in the back room of her boarding house, watching him shake like a man with fever. "I can't," Finch whispered. His hands trembled around the whiskey glass. "If Silas finds out, he'll kill me." "He'll kill more people if you stay silent," Essie said gently. "How many have died already? How many more before your conscience breaks? You don't understand. He has power. He has money. He has the sheriff, the mayor, half the judges in the territory. He doesn't have Marshall Cross. He doesn't have Nathaniel Brennan. He doesn't have the truth." Essie leaned forward. "Doctor, those children, they're hiding in fear. Their parents are dead. Their uncle tortured them. And you have evidence that could free them. You have the power to make this right." Finch closed his eyes. Tears leaked down his weathered face. "Rebecca Hayes didn't die from childbirth complications. I know. I tested her blood, found arsenic. Enough to kill her slowly over weeks. I documented everything, kept samples." His voice cracked. "But when I told Silas I was going to report it, he threatened my daughter. Said accidents happen to families. Said I should think carefully about my choices." "Where are the samples?" "Hidden. In my office. Behind a false panel in the examination room." Finch drained the whiskey, poured more with shaking hands. "There's also Carlos. The injuries didn't match a cave-in. The pattern was wrong. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull before the beams fell. He was dead before the collapse. I think someone hit him, then staged the accident." Essie's breath caught. Her Carlos. Her gentle, careful husband who never took risks, who checked everything twice. Murdered. "Give me the evidence," she said. "I'll keep it safe. I'll get it to Marshall Cross. And if Silas finds out it was me, then you leave town tonight. You take your daughter and you run, but you do the right thing first." Finch stared into his glass for a long moment, then nodded. Once. Final. "Come to my office after midnight. I'll have everything ready." Midnight found Essie at the back door of Dr. Finch's practice. The town was dark quiet, most folks asleep. The few who weren't were at the saloon, drunk and loud enough to provide cover. The door opened. Finch stood there, pale and sweating. He handed her a leather satchel. "Blood samples, medical records, everything." His voice was barely a whisper. "Rebecca's arsenic poisoning is documented day by day. Carlos's autopsy notes. 3 other suspicious deaths over the past 2 years, all linked to Silas. This is enough. It should be. Combined with testimony, it should be enough to hang him." Essie took the satchel, gripped his hand. "You're a brave man, Dr. Finch." "I'm a coward who took too long to find his spine." He managed a weak smile. "But maybe it's not too late to save my soul." She left through the back, moving through alleys and shadows, clutching the satchel like it held salvation. Which it did. She was almost to her boarding house when she heard it. A sound that made her blood freeze. Screaming. From Dr. Finch's office. Then silence. Essie ran back, satchel clutched tight, found the door open, found Finch on the floor gasping, clawing at his throat. An empty bottle of laudanum beside him. Too much. Way too much. "No." Essie dropped to her knees. "No, no, no." Finch's eyes found hers. Tried to speak. Couldn't. His lips were blue, tinged with the color of death creeping in. His breathing came in shallow gasps that rattled in his chest like stones in a can, but his eyes were clear, aware, knowing. He was dying, and he knew it, and there was nothing Essie could do. "No, no, please." Essie grabbed his hand, felt how cold it was already. "Stay with me. Fight it. Please fight it." But Finch's other hand moved weak and trembling to point at the satchel she still clutched, then to her, then toward the door. The message was clear. "Go, run, save them." "I can't leave you." Tears streamed down her face. "Augustus, please, I can't just—" His grip tightened for just a second. One last squeeze. His lips moved, forming words without sound. "Forgive me, for waiting too long, for being too afraid, for letting Rebecca die and Carlos die and all the others die because he'd been a coward who valued his own safety over justice. But at the end he'd found his courage, had done the right thing, had died for it." Essie pressed her forehead to his hand. "I forgive you. God forgives you. Rest now." Augustus Finch's eyes closed. His breathing stopped. And the good doctor who'd carried 2 years of guilt finally laid down his burden. And in the doorway, watching with cold satisfaction, stood Reeves, one of Silas's hired guns. "Boss said to tie up loose ends," Reeves said casually. "Looks like the good doctor decided to end his own suffering. Tragic. All that guilt over his failures, just couldn't take it anymore." Essie backed toward the rear door satchel hidden behind her back. "Don't bother running, Mrs. Vargas. We know you were here. We know what he gave you. You can hand it over now, or we can take it from your corpse. Your choice." Essie chose. She ran. Out the back door, through the alley, into the maze of buildings and shadows she'd known for 20 years. Heard boots pounding behind her. Heard Reeves shouting for Mackie. But she was small and fast and desperate. She made it to her boarding house, slammed the door, locked it, pressed her back against the wood, heart hammering. The satchel was safe. Dr. Finch was dead. And the war had just begun. Nate found out about Finch the next morning when Cross came to the ranch, face grim. "They're saying suicide," Cross reported. "But I saw the body, saw the bruises on his arms where someone held him down. This was murder dressed up as guilt." "Did Essie get the evidence?" "She did. She's at her place now, scared half to death, but safe. Has everything Finch documented. It's damning, Nate. It's enough." "Good." Nate loaded his rifle, checked his pistols. "Because I'm done playing by rules Silas doesn't follow." "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to make sure those children can come home, whatever it takes." Cross watched him work, saw the cold determination in his face, the set of his jaw. "You know he'll come for you now. Full force. No more warnings. Let him come." "Nate." "What? Don't get yourself killed. Those kids need you." "Then I better make sure I don't die." Cross left. The day passed in tense silence. Nate fortified the house best he could, moved furniture to block windows, set up firing positions, prepared for siege. He was ready when night fell. Ready when he heard the horses, 6 of them, coming up the road slow and deliberate. No hiding this time, no pretense, just 6 hired killers coming to finish the job. Nate stood on his porch, rifle in hand, and counted them in the moonlight. Colt, Mackie, Reeves, 3 others he didn't recognize, all armed, all dangerous. One of them carried a torch. "Nathaniel Brennan," Colt called out, "you got something that belongs to Mr. Blackwell. We're here to collect." "The children aren't here. We know. We'll find them later. Right now we're here for you." 6 against 1. Seems fair. Colt grinned. "Boss said to make it hurt. Said to make it last. Said to make sure the whole county hears what happens to people who cross Silas Blackwell." "Your boss talks too much." The torch arced through the air, landed on the porch roof. Caught, spread. And Nathaniel Brennan, 50 years old and fighting for more than just his life, raised his rifle and fired the first shot of a war that would end with justice or death. No middle ground, no surrender, just the sharp crack of gunfire splitting the Texas night and the knowledge that some stands were worth dying for. The battle for mercy had begun. Dark night and Papa. The first shot from Nate's rifle took Colt in the shoulder, spun him sideways off his horse. He went down screaming, clutching at the wound, blood black in the moonlight. The others scattered. Nate was already moving, diving off the burning porch, rolling behind the water trough as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. Wood splintered, glass shattered. The night erupted in muzzle flashes and thunder. He came up firing, caught Mackie in the leg, sent him sprawling. 5 left standing. The torch on his roof was spreading. Fire licked up the shingles, hungry and bright. Soon the whole house would be burning. Nate had minutes, not hours. He sprinted for the barn, bullets chasing him, kicking up dirt at his heels. Made it through the door, slammed it shut, threw the bar across. Not much protection, but enough to buy seconds. Reeves's voice from outside, cold and calm. "Burn him out. Boss wants him dead. Doesn't matter how." More torches. Nate watched through the cracks as they circled the barn, touching flame to dry wood. The old structure caught fast. Decades of hay dust and timber turned to kindling. Smoke filled his lungs. Heat pressed against his back. He had one chance. The hayloft window faced east, away from most of the guns. 15-foot drop to hard ground. He'd break something, probably. But broken was better than burned. Nate climbed the ladder fast, flames chasing him up. The smoke was thick now, choking. He could barely see, could barely breathe. He hit the window at a run, crashed through, fell. The ground came up hard and mean. Something in his left shoulder snapped. Pain, white-hot, blinding. He rolled, came up with his pistol in his right hand, fired blind into the smoke and flame. Heard a scream. One more down, 4 left. But the pain in his shoulder was crushing. His vision swam. Blood ran hot down his arm. He'd been shot or broken something in the fall. Didn't matter which. Both meant dying slow if he didn't end this fast. A shadow moved through the smoke. Reeves' grinning gun raised. End of the line, Ranger. The gunshot cracked across the night. But Reeves was the one who fell. And from the ridge behind him came voices, shouts, the thunder of hooves, riders pouring over the hill like avenging angels, 20 of them, 30, more. Torches blazing, guns firing into the air. The whole town of Redemption Springs riding to war. Miguel Santos reached Nate first, jumping from his horse before it fully stopped hitting the ground running. The miner was 50 years old with shoulders like an ox and hands scarred from a lifetime of hard labor. He'd worked under Owen Hayes, knew what a good man looked like, knew what evil looked like too. "Brennan." Miguel dropped to his knees, saw the blood. "How bad?" "I'll live." Nate's voice was tight with pain. "The others, running. My boys are chasing them down. Won't get far." Miguel looked at the burning barn, the burning house. "Jesus, he really tried to kill you." That was the idea. More riders arrived, shopkeepers and ranchers, the blacksmith and the school teacher, even old Mrs. Henderson, who ran the general store riding side saddle with a shotgun across her lap. Marshal Cross, dismounted, surveyed the carnage. 2 bodies, Colt bleeding out in the dirt, Mackey unconscious with a shattered leg, Reeves dead from a bullet to the chest. The others fled into the darkness. "We got 4 of them," Miguel reported. 2 dead, 2 captured, rest scattered. Cross knelt beside Nate, examined the shoulder, entry wound in the back exit through the front. Clean shot, missed bone, but bleeding heavy. "You need a doctor." "Finch is dead." "There's another in San Antonio, 3-hour ride." "I'm not going anywhere until I know those men are locked up." "Stubborn fool." But Cross was already wrapping his bandana around the wound, applying pressure. "You could have died." "But I didn't." Nate looked at the crowd of townspeople, their faces lit by burning buildings. "Why did you come?" Miguel spoke up, voice carrying across the gathered men and women. "Because we were ashamed. Because we knew what Silas was, and we did nothing. Because good people died, and we looked away." He met Nate's eyes. "But when we heard he sent 6 men to murder you for protecting children, something broke. We couldn't stay silent anymore, not one more day. He'll come after you now, all of you." "Let him try." Mrs. Henderson's voice was sharp. "I've lived in this town 40 years, watched it turn rotten from Silas's poison. About time someone stood up." "About time we all stood up," the blacksmith added. "Together." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Nate saw it in their faces. Fear still, yes. But something else too. Anger, determination. The kind of resolve that came when people finally hit their limit. Silas Blackwell had pushed too hard, hurt too many, and the town had found its spine. "Get him to San Antonio," Cross ordered. I'll take these prisoners to the jail, start building formal charges." "What charges?" Miguel asked. "Attempted murder, arson, assault, and that's just tonight." Cross's face was grim. "Combined with the evidence Essie has with testimony from the miners with the saw and the ledger Nate found, we've got enough to hang Silas 6 times over." "If the judge listens," someone muttered. "He'll listen, because I'm writing to Austin myself to bring Judge Morrison here. And Morrison doesn't take bribes, doesn't play politics, just follows the law." Cross looked around at the gathered crowd. "You all willing to testify? Stand up in court and tell what you know." Silence. Then one by one, hands raised. Miguel first, then Mrs. Henderson, the blacksmith, the school teacher, 20 hands, 30, more. "Then we've got him," Cross said. "We've finally got him." Nate's vision was starting to blur from blood loss. He tried to stand swayed. Miguel caught him. "Easy, amigo. You're done fighting for tonight. The children. I need to get word to the children that I'm alive. Essie already sent a rider. They'll know by morning." Miguel helped him onto a horse, climbed up behind to keep him steady. "Now we ride, before you bleed out and make all this heroism pointless." They rode into the night, leaving the burning buildings behind, leaving the captured men and the dead ones, leaving the battlefield where a town had finally found the courage to fight back. But Nate barely saw any of it. The pain was crushing now, dragging him down into darkness. He held on to consciousness by pure stubbornness, by the need to know how this ended. The last thing he heard before passing out was Miguel's voice, low and certain. "Your children will be proud. When they're grown, when they tell this story, they'll say their father was a man who stood alone against evil." And won. Nate woke to sunlight and agony. He was in a bed, clean sheets, bandages tight around his shoulder, the smell of carbolic and laudanum sharp in his nose. A voice beside him, "Welcome back." He turned his head slowly. Marshal Cross sat in a chair by the window, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "How long?" Nate's voice was rough. 2 days. The doctor in San Antonio dug out the bullet, sewed you up, said you were lucky. Few inches to the right, and you'd be dead. Doesn't feel lucky." "Never does." Cross poured water from a pitcher, helped Nate drink. "But you're alive. And Silas's men are in jail. 4 captured total, 2 dead. The others fled the territory. And Silas, still in Redemption Springs, pretending he had nothing to do with it, says his men acted on their own, that he never authorized violence." Cross's mouth tightened. "But we've got the evidence now. All of it. Dr. Finch's records, the saw, the ledger, testimony from 15 townspeople. Morrison's riding in tomorrow to oversee the hearing." Nate tried to sit up, gasped at the pain, gave up. "I need to see the children. They're on their way. Essie's bringing them from the Comanche camp. Should be here by this afternoon. They're safe. Safe and worried sick about you." Cross leaned forward. "Nate, there's something you should know. When word reached them that you'd been shot, Lily refused to stay at the camp. Said her place was with you. Chief Running Bear tried to convince her to wait until it was safe, but she wouldn't hear it. That little girl has a will of iron." Despite the pain, Nate smiled. "She does at that. Annie hasn't stopped crying since she heard, and Sam keeps asking for Papa. Essie says he learned the word just yesterday." Something warm spread through Nate's chest, pushing back the pain. "He called me Papa. Clear as day, according to Essie. She said it was the sweetest and saddest thing she'd ever heard. A baby calling for his father who might be dying 3 days right away." "I'm not dying." "No, you're too stubborn for that." Cross stood, moved to the door. "They should be here soon. I'll give you privacy when they arrive. But Nate, be prepared. Lily's been through a lot. Seeing you like this, it might break something in her. Or make her stronger. Maybe both." Cross left. Nate lay there staring at the ceiling, taking inventory of his body. Shoulder destroyed, but healing. Ribs bruised from the fall, burns on his back from the fire, but alive, breathing, able to fight another day. The door opened an hour later, and Lily Hayes burst through like a small storm, eyes wild, face streaked with tears. She stopped when she saw him, just stopped, stood there trembling, taking in the bandages, the pale skin, the weakness. "Papa," the word came out broken. A sob and a prayer and a declaration all at once. It was the first time she'd called him that. Nate's throat closed. "Hey, sweetheart." She ran to the bed, collapsed beside it, grabbed his good hand with both of hers. "They said you were shot. They said you almost died. They said you fought 6 men alone. I had help. Not at first. At first it was just you." Tears poured down her face. Why would you risk your life like that?" "Because you're worth it. All 3 of you." Annie appeared in the doorway clutching her rag doll, the one she'd given Nate for safekeeping. She didn't run. Just walked slow to the bed, climbed up careful of his injuries, and laid her head on his chest. "Papa hurt," she whispered. Words, real words, her voice rusty from disuse, but there. "Papa's okay," Nate managed. "Papa's going to be fine." And then Essie was there with Sam in her arms. The baby's face lit up when he saw Nate. "Papa, Papa!" Sam reached for him with grabby hands. Essie brought him close, let the baby touch Nate's face with tiny fingers. Sam babbled something incomprehensible, pure joy at being reunited. And Nate, 50 years old, and shot and burned and beaten, held his children, all 3 of them, and felt something that had been missing for 5 years settle back into place. Family. Not the one he'd lost, but the one he'd found. Lily was crying now, really crying, 5 days of terror and worry pouring out. "I thought I lost you. I thought Uncle Silas won. I thought we'd be alone again." "Never." Nate's voice was fierce despite the weakness. "You're never going to be alone again. I promised you that. But what if something happens? What if he tries again? Then I'll fight again, and again. And however many times it takes until you're safe." Annie lifted her head, looked at him with those old soul eyes. "Forever, forever. Promise, promise." She laid her head back down content, believing. Sam had fallen asleep against Nate's good shoulder, snoring softly. Lily still clutched his hand like she'd never let go. And in that moment, in that cramped room in San Antonio, a family that had been broken and scattered and nearly destroyed found itself whole. Not perfect, not unmarked by pain, but together. And that was everything. Essie shooed the children out an hour later so Nate could rest. They protested, but she was firm. Papa needed sleep. They could visit again after dinner. When they were gone, she pulled up the chair Cross had vacated. "You scared 10 years off my life," she said. "Sorry about that." "No, you're not." But she was smiling. "The town's talking about nothing else. How you stood against 6 men, how the whole community rode to save you, how Silas's empire is crumbling. Is it? His hired guns are in jail singing like canaries, trying to trade testimony for lighter sentences. They're implicating Silas in everything. The murders, the arsons, the intimidation. Cross has enough evidence now to charge him with 3 counts of murder conspiracy fraud and a dozen other crimes. Will it stick? Morrison's not like other judges. He can't be bought, can't be scared. He'll look at the evidence and make a fair ruling." Essie leaned forward. "Nate, you did it. You saved those children. You brought down a monster. You gave a whole town back its courage." "I just did what was right. That's more than most people manage." She stood, smoothed her skirt. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the journey back to Redemption Springs. The hearing's in 3 days. Judge Morrison wants you there to testify. I'll be there. Even half dead, especially half dead. Those children deserve to see this through, deserve to know that evil doesn't always win." Essie paused at the door. "They already know that, Nate, because they have you." After she left, Nate lay in the quiet, listening to the sounds of San Antonio outside his window. Wagons, voices, life continuing on. He thought about Abigail and Emma, wondered if they could see him now, wondered if they approved of what he'd done, how he'd opened his heart again after swearing it closed forever. Decided they would. Abigail had always said he had too much love in him to waste it on grief, that if something ever happened to her, he should find a way to keep living. He'd tried, failed for 5 years. But now, holding 3 broken children who needed him as much as he needed them, he'd finally figured it out. Living wasn't about forgetting the dead. It was about honoring them by loving the living. And he loved Lily and Annie and Sam with a fierceness that surprised him. Would die for them, would kill for them, would stand alone against armies if that's what it took. They'd called him Papa, and he'd earned that name in blood and fire. And the simple act of refusing to give up when giving up would have been easier. Sleep took him, then dragged him down into darkness. But for the first time in 5 years, the darkness wasn't empty. It was full of voices, 3 children calling him home. And Nathaniel Brennan, battered and scarred and healing, smiled in his sleep and dreamed of pancakes and laughter and a future where mercy won and evil burned. The war wasn't over yet, but the ending was already written. Justice was coming. And this time justice wore the face of 3 children who'd survived hell, and the heart of one stubborn man who refused to let them face it alone. 3 days until the trial. 3 days until Silas Blackwell faced everything he'd done. 3 days until a family broken by cruelty became whole by choice. Nate could wait 3 days. He'd waited 5 years to feel alive again. 3 days was nothing. Justice and legacy. The courthouse in Redemption Springs had never seen a crowd like this. Every seat filled. People standing 3 deep along the walls, more pressed against the windows outside, straining to hear. 3 weeks had passed since the night Nate was shot. 3 weeks of healing and gathering and preparing. His shoulder still ached, probably always would, but he could move it, could lift Sam with his good arm and steady himself with the weak one. That was enough. Judge Morrison sat at the bench, 61 years old, with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human sin and refused to be impressed by any of it. He'd ridden in from Austin with a reputation for fairness that scared corrupt officials more than any threat of violence. Silas Blackwell sat at the defendant's table, flanked by 2 lawyers from Austin. But the lawyers looked nervous, kept whispering to each other, shuffling papers, glancing at the door like they wanted to run. Because the evidence stacked against their client was a mountain, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. Nate sat in the front row with Lily on one side, Annie on the other. Sam was in Essie's lap, miraculously quiet, sensing somehow that this was important. Marshall Cross stood at the prosecution table with a young lawyer named Daniel Carver, who was so nervous his hands shook. But he'd done his homework, knew the law, and, more importantly, knew right from wrong. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. This court is now in session. We're here to determine whether Silas Blackwell should stand trial for 3 counts of murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit fraud and assault on a minor. Prosecution, present your case. Carver stood, his voice steadier than his hands. Your Honor, we will prove that Silas Blackwell murdered Owen Hayes, Rebecca Hayes, and Carlos Morales in pursuit of financial gain. We will prove he systematically eliminated anyone who stood between him and control of the Hayes silver mine. And we will prove he tortured a child to force her compliance. He laid it out piece by piece. The saw found in the mine shed with fresh wood fibers, the ledger documenting suspicious deaths. The testimony of miners who'd seen Silas near the equipment shed the night before Owen died. Then came Dr. Finch's evidence. Essie had saved it all. Blood samples from Rebecca Hayes showing arsenic levels that could only come from deliberate repeated poisoning. Medical records documenting her decline, dose by dose. Notes in Finch's handwriting detailing his suspicions and his fear. Dr. Augustus Finch died 3 weeks ago, Carver said quietly. The official cause was suicide by laudanum overdose, but witnesses saw bruises on his arms, saw evidence of a struggle. Dr. Finch was murdered because he knew the truth and was finally ready to speak it. Silas's lawyers objected, called it circumstantial, called it hearsay, but Judge Morrison let it stand. The evidence speaks for itself, Morrison said. Continue. Carlos Morales came next. Essie testified about the sawdust on his clothes, about his careful nature, about his inspection of the tunnel that very morning. Miguel Santos testified about how Owen Hayes ran a safe mine, about how the collapse made no sense unless someone had weakened the supports. The courtroom was silent, rapt, watching a monster's empire crumble piece by piece. Then Carver said the words everyone had been waiting for. The prosecution calls Lily Hayes to the stand. Nate felt Lily stiffen beside him. She'd known this was coming, had practiced what she'd say. But knowing and doing were different things. He leaned close, whispered in her ear, "You can do this. Tell them the truth. That's all, just the truth." She nodded, stood, walked to the witness stand on legs that trembled but held. The bailiff swore her in. Her hand on the Bible was small and bandaged. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear. "I do," Carver approached gently. "Lily, can you tell the court what happened on July 14th of this year? That's the day Uncle Silas burned my arm." A murmur ran through the crowd. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. "Silence!" "Can you describe what happened?" Lily took a breath. "Uncle Silas wanted me to sign papers giving him control of my father's silver mine. I said no. The mine belonged to my daddy. Uncle Silas said I was being stubborn, said I'd regret it." Her voice stayed steady, matter of fact. He grabbed my arm, held it against the stove. The stove was hot because he'd built up the fire special. He held me there while I screamed, said he'd do the same to my baby brother if I didn't sign. "Did you sign?" "No, sir." "Why not?" "Because my daddy died for that mine, and my mama told me with her last breath not to let Uncle Silas take it. I couldn't betray them, not even to stop the pain." Someone in the crowd started crying, then someone else, then a wave of it sweeping through the packed courthouse. Carver showed the court Lily's arm. The bandages came off. The scars were visible now, pink and shiny, the shape of 5 fingers, and a palm burned into her skin forever. The jury looked sick. "Lily, you said your mother told you not to let Silas take the mine. When did she tell you this?" "Right before she died. She was so weak she could barely talk. But she held my hand and said, 'Don't let him take it. It's yours. It's Samuel's, all we have left.'" Lily's eye filled with tears. I promised her, and then she closed her eyes and never opened them again. "Do you believe your mother knew she was being poisoned?" "Objection!" One of Silas's lawyers shot to his feet. "Speculation." I'll rephrase. "Lily, did your mother ever say anything about the medicine Uncle Silas brought her? She said it made her feel worse. Said maybe we should ask Dr. Finch for something different. But Uncle Silas said no. Said the doctor knew best. Said she had to keep taking it or she'd die." Lily wiped her eye. "So she took it, and she died anyway." The courtroom was crying now, openly. Even Judge Morrison's eyes looked suspiciously bright. "One more question, Lily. The night before your father died, did you see anything unusual?" "I saw Uncle Silas going into the equipment shed at the mine, late at night. He was carrying something long. He stayed in there over an hour." Her voice hardened. "The next day my father was crushed in a tunnel collapse. They said the beams were rotten, but they weren't. They were cut." "How do you know?" "Because I heard Uncle Silas talking to one of his men later. Heard him say, 'Owen never knew what hit him. Probably thought it was just bad luck.'" And then he laughed. The courtroom exploded, people shouting, crying. Judge Morrison banged his gavel until the handle cracked. "Order! I will have order." Silence fell heavy and terrible. Silas's lawyers tried to cross-examine, tried to make Lily seem confused, coached, unreliable. But she didn't waver, didn't change her story, just told the truth in that steady, heartbreaking voice. Finally, Silas himself couldn't take it anymore. He stood knocking over his chair. "This is ridiculous. She's lying. She's a half-breed mongrel with an imagination. None of this is real." The words hung in the air like poison. Judge Morrison's face went cold as winter. "Mr. Blackwell, you will sit down and be silent, or I will hold you in contempt." "I will not be silent. These people, they owe me money. They owe me respect. I built this town. I gave them everything." Silas was screaming now, all control gone. "And they believe some brat who's too stupid to know her place. She's Comanche trash. Her mother was Comanche trash. They don't deserve that mine. They don't deserve anything." Nate was on his feet, moving towards Silas before he knew he was moving. Cross caught him, held him back. But Annie was faster. The little girl stood up in her seat, walked to the railing that separated the gallery from the court, and for the first time since her mother died, spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're a bad man. You hurt Mama. You hurt Daddy. You hurt Lily, and you made me too scared to talk for so long." Tears streamed down her face. "But I'm not scared anymore, because Nate loves us, and you don't. You just love money." She pointed at Silas with her small finger. "You're going to jail, and we're going to be happy, and you can't stop it." Then she turned and walked back to Nate, climbed into his lap, and buried her face in his chest. The courtroom erupted again, but this time it was cheering, applause, people standing, shouting support, crying with joy. Judge Morrison let it go for a moment, then banged his gavel. "I've heard enough. Silas Blackwell, by the evidence presented, and by your own words in this court, I find sufficient cause to bind you over for trial on 3 counts of murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit fraud assault on a minor and a litany of other charges that will be formally filed." He looked at the broken man standing at the defendant's table. "You will be held without bail. Your assets are frozen pending resolution of the case. And may God have mercy on your soul, because this court certainly won't." 2 deputies moved forward, put Silas in chains. As they led him past the gallery, he looked at Lily with pure hatred. "You'll never be safe. Never. I have friends. I have money hidden. I'll come back and I'll finish what I started." Nate stepped into the aisle, got right in Silas's face. "You come near these children again, and there won't be enough of you left to bury. That's not a threat. That's a promise." Silas spat at him. Missed. The deputies dragged him away, still screaming threats and curses. When the courtroom finally quieted, when people started filing out, still talking excitedly, Judge Morrison called Nate to the bench. "Mr. Brennan, there's still the matter of custody. The children need a legal guardian." "I'd like to petition for formal adoption, Your Honor." "I assumed as much. But there's a complication." Morrison looked at Lily. "The child has Comanche heritage through her mother's line. If that can be verified, she and her siblings would be eligible for tribal enrollment. That would provide additional protections under federal treaty law, make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge your guardianship later." "I know. We've already been to see Chief Running Bear. He's willing to recognize them if they choose to be recognized." "And do they?" Nate looked at Lily, Annie, Sam sleeping in Essie's arms. "That's their choice to make, not mine." Morrison smiled for the first time. "You're a good man, Brennan. This court will delay final custody determination for 30 days to allow for tribal verification. If the Comanche Nation recognizes these children, their adoption will proceed under both territorial and tribal law. Strongest protection possible." "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me. Thank those children. They're the bravest witnesses I've seen in 30 years on the bench." 2 days later, they rode east. Nate, Lily, Annie, Sam, and Essie. The journey took most of a day, following trails Essie knew by heart. Chief Running Bear met them at the edge of the settlement. He looked at Lily for a long moment, seeing something in her face that made him smile. "You have your grandmother's eyes. Laughing Sky would be proud of you." The ceremony was simple. The council of elders gathered, asked questions, listened to answers. When they asked Lily why she wanted to be recognized as Comanche, she didn't hesitate. "Because it's who I am. My mama taught me to be proud of my blood, all of it, the Irish from my father, the Comanche from my mother. She said people would try to make me ashamed, try to make me hide. But she said hiding who you are is the same as dying." Lily's voice was strong. "I'm not going to die. I'm going to live, and I'm going to be proud." The elders approved unanimously. They gave her a name, Little Ember, for the burn scars she carried and the fire in her heart that refused to be extinguished. They gave Sam a name, Sky's Echo, for the way his laughter rang out clear and pure like his grandmother's used to. They gave Annie a name, Silent Wind, for the quiet strength she'd shown the way she'd survived by going still and observing until it was safe to speak again. And they gave Nate a gift, a beaded bracelet made by Laughing Sky herself, saved for decades, waiting for the right person. "You are not Comanche by blood," Chief Running Bear said, "but you are Comanche by deed. You protected our children when their own blood family tried to destroy them. You fought for justice when it would have been easier to look away. You opened your heart when it would have been safer to keep it closed." He tied the bracelet around Nate's wrist. "You are family now, always." They stayed 3 days, learned songs and stories, ate at the communal fires, watched Annie blossom under the attention of the elder women who taught her to weave and bead, watched Sam toddle after the other children, fearless and joyful, watched Lily stand taller, speak louder, claim her heritage with pride. On the 3rd night, Lily found Nate sitting by the fire, staring into the flames. "What you thinking about how things change? How a month ago I was alone. Now I have you 3. Have a family. Have a purpose." He smiled. "Thinking about how lucky I am. We're the lucky ones. I don't know about that." She sat beside him, leaned against his shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Can I tell you something? Anything. When Mama was dying right at the end, she was talking to people we couldn't see, talking to Daddy, smiling at empty air." Lily's voice was soft, and right before she stopped breathing, she looked at me and said, "Don't worry, someone's coming. Someone good. He'll keep you safe." I thought she was delirious, didn't think it meant anything. And now I think maybe she saw you. Maybe somehow she knew you'd find us, that you'd save us when everyone else looked away. Nate's throat went tight. "Your mama sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was. You would have liked her." "I'm sure I would have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to coals, listening to the sounds of the camp settling for the night. Annie's laugh from one of the lodges, Sam babbling to Essie, life, simple and good. "Nate, yeah, can we go home now? I miss our house. Our house. Our, not yours, not temporary, ours." "Yeah," Nate said, his voice rough with emotion. "Yeah, we can go home." 1 year later. Summer 1879 came hot and bright to Llano County. The ranch had changed. New barn where the old one burned, new fences, new horses in the corral. The house had been expanded, a 2nd bedroom added for when the girls got older and needed their own space. In the garden behind the house stood 4 wooden markers, simple crosses made from oak carved with names and dates. Abigail Brennan, beloved wife and mother. Emma Brennan, forever young. Rebecca Hayes, daughter of 2 worlds. Owen Hayes, honest man, loving father. Lily visited them every morning. Put fresh wildflowers on each grave. Talked to them like they could hear. Maybe they could. Today, she brought Annie and Sam. Annie was 7 now, chattering nonstop, making up for all the months of silence. She told the markers about her drawings, about the horse Nate had given her, about how she was learning to read. Sam was walking everywhere, running really a tornado of energy and joy. He put rocks on each grave, solemn offerings from a 2-year-old who didn't understand death, but understood love. "Mama, Daddy, we're happy," Lily said to the markers. "I know you can't answer, but I hope you're happy too. Hope you're together somewhere. Hope you know we're safe." A hand on her shoulder. Nate standing behind her, strong and steady. "They know," he said. "How can you be sure?" "Because I talked to Abigail and Emma. And I believe they hear. I believe wherever they are, they see us. See you 3, and they're glad." "You think your wife would approve of us?" "I know she would. Abby always said I had too much love in me to waste it on grief, that if something happened to her, I should find a way to keep living." Nate squeezed Lily's shoulder. "She'd say you 3 are the answer to a prayer I didn't know I was praying." Essie called from the house. Dinner was ready. The smell of roasting chicken and fresh bread drifted across the yard. They walked back together, a family, Nate and Lily and Annie and Sam. Essie met them on the porch smiling. She and Nate had grown close over the year. Not romance exactly, not yet, but the possibility of it. The slow building of something good. The table was crowded, food piled high. They held hands, said grace, ate with the comfortable chaos of people who belong together. After dinner, after the dishes were done, and Sam was asleep and Annie was reading in bed, Nate and Lily sat on the porch watching the stars come out. Nate, you know how people say blood is thicker than water? I've heard that. I don't think it's true. Lily looked up at him with those clear blue eyes, so much older than 11 years should allow. I think choice is thicker than blood, because blood is what you're born with. But family, real family, that's what you choose. Who you choose to love, who you choose to fight for, who you choose to call home. Nate couldn't speak for a moment, then he pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. When did you get so smart? I had a good teacher. They sat there as the sun set and the night came on. Tomorrow Lily would start school in Redemption Springs. Annie would help Essie with the baking. Sam would terrorize the chickens and laugh at everything. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new memories to replace the painful ones. But tonight on this porch under these stars, a family that had been forged in fire and pain and impossible choices was simply happy. Silas Blackwell was in prison awaiting execution. The trial had been quick once it started, the evidence overwhelming. He'd been sentenced to hang, though appeals would keep him alive for years yet. But he was powerless now, broken, defeated, and the children he'd tried to destroy were thriving. Tell me something, Nate, Lily said sleepily. If you could go back, change things, make it so he never came to your door, would you? Never. Not even to avoid getting shot and burned and nearly dying. Not even then. Because finding you three, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Saved my life as much as I saved yours. How? Because I was dead inside, just going through motions. You reminded me how to live, how to love, how to believe in something again. He looked at her. So no, I wouldn't change a thing. Every scar was worth it. She smiled that rare, genuine smile that made her look like the child she should have been all along. Me too, she whispered. Every scar was worth it. Inside, Annie started singing a Comanche lullaby Chief Running Bear had taught her. Her voice was sweet and clear, carrying through the open window. Sam laughed in his sleep, dreaming baby dreams of horses and sunshine and infinite tomorrows. And Nathaniel Brennan, 61-year-old former Ranger father of 3, closed his eyes and breathed in the moment. This was it. This was everything. Not the life he'd planned, not the life he'd had, but the life he'd chosen, the life that had chosen him back. The stars wheeled overhead. The night deepened. And on a small ranch in Llano County, Texas, a family built from broken pieces slept peacefully. Together. Safe. Home. The end.